The annual Virtual Rainbow brings together LGBTQ+ youth and their families, healthcare providers, community members, and other professionals to learn about and celebrate diversity and inclusion. Thank you for joining, everyone, and welcome.
We are here with Kimberly Richardson from Montana 4-H. So Kimberly is the Montana State University Deer Lodge County Extension Agent and the MSU Extension DEI Chair and the NACAA DEI Advisory Board Chair. And maybe Kimberly, when you get on, you can tell everybody what all those initials stand for. But anyway, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you, Kimberly.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Rainbows Over the Rockies Summit Part 2. Now we've had a year 1 and now a year 2. Really excited to be back. I was able to participate in last year's as a presenter as well. So really enjoying the experience. We've had some really great individuals and lineups with presentations, and we have plenty more this afternoon and plenty more all of tomorrow. So hopefully you can tune in to everybody. And then of course, there's always the joy of getting the YouTube videos after to go revisit any of the events or presentations that you might have missed, or you want more information or just want to view again. So like I said, I'm the extension agent in Deer Lodge County. I am a sole agent, so I cover all program areas from 4-H and youth development to community development to agriculture and horticulture, and then a little bit of family consumer sciences. And so the diversity, all of the DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion groups are specifically for Montana State University Extension. About 2 years ago, we decided that we needed to start going in that direction in extension and have been, exploring those avenues of awareness and bringing that back to extension and seeing how we're going to formulate that into our program areas, as well as the NACA, which is the National Association of Agricultural Extension Agents. And that is going to be another group really looking at how to add diversity, equity, and inclusion into all of their programs, into everything that they have going on, as they really want to start engaging not only in diversification of agriculture, but diversification of the individuals that represent that group. So let's go forward. So why are we here today? So we're looking at the new and adopted best practices for inclusion and for individuals and all genders and sexual orientations within the Montana 4-H Center for Youth Development. This project has been a really, really great project for everyone that has worked on that. There's been a lot of great efforts put into that. And before we get started, I've been really wanting to, have summer, I guess. So let's look at one of my little icebreakers that I like to utilize with 4-H youth is, so because I want summer so badly, we're going to be flavors of ice cream. So go ahead and utilize the chat box and tell us, if you were an ice cream flavor, which flavor would you be? And for me, I'm going to be the Jamocha fudge ice cream. So if you all want to upload that into the chat box of what flavor of ice cream would you be? And then we'll go ahead and go into the 4-H pledge. I don't know how many out there in the audience are actual 4-Hers or have been a 4-Her or know of the 4-H pledge, but I would like to start with that. And the pledge reads, I pledge my head to clearer thinking, my heart to greater loyalty, my hands to larger service, and my health to better living. For my club, my community, my country, and my world. And I'd like to start with that just because within that pledge, embedded within that is inclusion. We are trying to reach everyone with everything we got and to make the best better. So a little background information of where we are at the national level, and then again, where we are here in Montana. So 4-H at the national level is the largest youth development organization. It engages millions across the country in helping youth understand different programming through experiential learning, explore different areas, and they definitely offer so many great experiences for youth to not only, explore what they are interested in, but also to look at things that, the rest of the country or the rest of the world is interested in. One of the things coming out nationally and where this group got most of their resources from to go in this direction was that there is an affirmation in 4-H that they are inclusive to all. And that means everything, regardless of race, sexual orientation, gender identity. 4-H is inclusive to everyone. And based on this national inclusion affirmation, Montana 4-H really wanted to go that direction, and especially because it seems like our world culture is definitely embracing that. And so we really wanted to look at that from the LGBTQ plus perspective, because in Montana, we have about 19,000 youth participants and then 4,000 volunteer members that, serve as our club leaders in, anything from agriculture to sewing to cake baking, you name it. The sky is the limit when we have volunteers and what they're really great at doing. And then we just recently have, through the state office of youth development, we have approved our inclusion policy that was adapted from the national one. And one thing of note here is that we're one of the very few states that actually have an improved inclusion policy that to date where they can actually share that with constituency and within their 4-H program. And this program is going to be, and has already, so the state office does a couple of symposiums, and so this information is being presented right now in the month of April to all of our 4-H faculty and staff. So a big shout out needs to be given out to the individuals that sat upon this committee. They named it the Montana 4-H Access and Equity Committee. They have been working pretty regularly, very, very strategically in trying to make this happen. There has been a little bit of turnover, but the unsounding heroes here that are in the room with us today to also answer question and answers at the end of this session are, in no particular order, Alyssa Zern, Campbell Barrett, Mary Frances Sushi, and then Todd Kesner's picture is there. He is actually the overseer or the director of the state's office for 4-H and the Youth Development Center. And so it's through his guidance or his overall oversight to go ahead and push this policy through. And then there's a couple of members. I wasn't able to get a picture. I wasn't able to find a picture for David Myers, but he's also a member of this committee and is still active member. Then we lost two members from this committee. One was Stephanie Davidson, who has now left Montana State University for another opportunity. And then Sheila Friedrichs, who actually retired here just recently. So a big shout out to these folks and all of the hard work that they have put in to make this happen, and just a job well done for them. So can we all give them a virtual applause before we move forward, because they did an excellent job. So just a real quick brief history of how this all began here in Montana. So in about April of 2019, there were several of us extension agents with the help of Mary Fran. We attended a conference setting in Billings at the National Extension Conference on Volunteerism, and we all were a part of a session that just spoke to us about what we needed to do with our efforts of LGBTQ plus inclusion in Montana. And so shortly after that, Mary Fran got together, sent out some emails, touched base with folks. And in around August 2019, she created the original task force. And that task force, really made some headway. And one of the things that actually transpired out of that task force was this exact conference. The Rainbows Over the Rockies idea was, a brainchild out of that original task force. And that was about December 2019. And then January is when we have our 4-H updates. And so it was presented to the 4-H extension faculty about, joining this committee. And so in that particular meeting, that was when the 4-H Access and Equity Task Force or working group was formed. And then after that, then on May 2020, when we were all in lockdown and experiencing the global pandemic, then we actually were able to participate in the first annual Rainbows Over the Rockies Summit. And now, then in October, we went through and had annual conference, and Campbell actually was able to get up and present their preliminary drafts to all of Extension at annual conference of what direction this policy guideline was going to be looking at. And then currently, again, like I mentioned previously, the state office is going to 2 different institutes. The first one was already held in Miles City to update the 4-H staff and faculty of this new policy. And then the next institute will take place in Missoula at the end of the month, providing the same information about the policy to the extension staff on the other side of the state. So now this is going to be a real quick breakdown. Obviously, the document in entirety is probably about 20 pages, and there are different aspects of that policy that we won't go into huge detail with. I just wanted to give a brief overview, especially given the amount of time that we have to visit about this. But it's broken down into several groups and several chapters, if you will. So we have the importance of terminology, ensuring paperwork's inclusive and affirming, programmatic considerations, facility considerations, communication practices, responding to concerns and complaints, and then finally wrapping up with the actual non-discrimination policy for our respective university. So looking at the first chapter that they are looking at. So in this chapter, it is a pretty straightforward list of accepted terms and definitions. And the purpose of the terms and definitions was mostly just to provide awareness, to provide education, to give folks that may have not seen the terminology a little bit more background information, so that when they're going to present their programs or going to speak about this, they actually are utilizing the proper term and its proper definition. The other key thing to remember with this chapter on terminology is that it's not an inclusive, it doesn't have every term that has ever been used in every single situation or every single sentence. The other key piece too is that it's going to really depend on what is accepted in your geographical location. And so we don't address that. We utilize what is available, and it's not comprehensive, but it is a good list of terms and their definitions to get people started. And again, if you are going to adopt this for your 4-H program, definitely you might want to consider some of those variances in different terms used with your specific area. So the next chapter is ensuring paperwork is inclusive and affirming. So one of the key things that came out of this is that the understanding that gender identification is private. Sex assigned at birth is private. And so there are very few instances within the 4-H program where this information needs to be shared outside of staff. And there are very few instances where that is even an issue. When it needs to be shared, it's going to be at the discretion specifically of the 4-H staff and volunteers, and most likely with the guidance of the state office, especially because, again, we will honor the privacy of those specific terms and those individuals. Some of the options, especially if, for evaluations, forms, anything like that is going to be given out to all 4-Hers, there's a key couple of things that can be put in there. If you need to ask for gender, you can put in a fill in the blank type of question to where they can fill that in with whatever their respective identity is, and then that you can also offer bubble options with another option so that everybody is included. And again, this would be across the board for all 4-Hers, for everybody in the program participating. So verification on transgender and other types of affiliations are not necessary or appropriate. So we cannot ask our 4-H constituency, our 4-H youth, to verify any of these types of terms or anything that they identify with. We take them for what their word is. And again, it's not appropriate to share any of that information. We accept what their gender identity is, and we roll with what their accepted gender identity is. What they choose on, that particular program, that's how we will honor that. Then looking at our programmatic considerations. Again, our programs are offered specifically for all 4-Hers. There is no discrimination whatsoever. Inclusion is shared widely and across all of those program areas, and we will be very mindful of that, and we need to really be respectful when we are offering our programs, that we definitely provide that training for our staff and volunteers. I think training and education is key so that they're able to navigate whatever happens, within their programs, within, their clubs, that they're absolutely, upholding these policies and guidelines. In that training for our staff and volunteers, we will model proper pronoun usage so that they get comfortable. Staff, a lot of our staff members may not have ever seen proper use of pronouns, as well as our 4-Hers. So by being able to model it from, the staff down, that's really going to help everyone get accustomed to it. And then it enables everybody to be referred to in the identity that they relate to. We also are going to avoid segregation and categorization in our programs, meaning that we're not going to, create groups based on gender identity or other types of segregatory classifications. We really want to include everybody and, create groups, where kids are feeling safe, kids are feeling secure. We also want to ask for clarification. Again, this has to be looked at in privacy. If we need clarification, we need to go to the source. And if we get that clarification again, it needs to be kept private. And the best person to go to that is the individual that you're dealing with. One of the other things that we need to consider programmatically are our tour, our facilities. So being able to offer a tour with families is really great, because then you can share with everyone what that facility has to offer as far as restrooms, as far as showering, as far as sleeping capabilities, and what is going to be expected there, and what it has the capability to do. Then we're looking at those specific facility considerations. So it is going to be our best practice to try to create accommodations to the best of our abilities that align with an individual's gender identity, and staying with that. And if we want to have everybody sleep in single occupancy rooms, then we offer that to everybody. We also make it known to everybody, again, privacy, but we also don't single out individuals and have them, you're going to sleep in this area. We just make it universal for everyone, so that privacy is protected, so that the youth are safe, they feel secure, and so that they can engage without having to feel like they have been isolated for any reason whatsoever, because 4-H, again, is promoting these programs for everyone and participation for everyone. The key thing with, because there's a lot of questions that I'm sure will arise with sleeping accommodations and things like that. However, keep in mind that there are guidelines, there are dress codes, there are just behavioral type standards that we uphold 4-Hers to, and 4-Hers actually sign into, a contract when they join 4-H that they will uphold those guidelines, uphold those values. And so that's universal for everybody. And so if one of those guidelines is not adhered to, then it needs to be addressed accordingly, the way that any 4-Her breaking a rule would be addressed. There's events where, partners, boyfriends, girlfriends can be invited, and we have to allow whatever that individual's chosen partner is, they're allowed to go to those events. We do not exclude based on anything. We do not discriminate based on any item. We truly, truly promote open participation. 4-H, again, is for everyone. And then when we're looking at the showering situation, there is never going to be a point where any faculty has to be in that private room, in that private shower, but we need to be in earshot. So that's going to be where you can make sure that the 4-H individual is safe, that they haven't fallen, or, gotten scalded or something, where you can hear them, and if they had an issue. And that would be for everybody. Communication practices. So again, and the big thing is identification confidentiality. So gender identity, sex assigned at birth, any of those things that we mentioned prior that are confidential are still confidential, and we need to definitely keep that private. There are very, very few instances where that information can be disclosed. And it is the 4-H expectation that we will maintain that privacy on all levels for every 4-Her. And one of the key things here, I think, with this is that when we offer our programs, that we really try to follow non-discrimination policies, but also to address the audience very, very broadly, address questions to where you're including everybody within the group, have everybody be involved in that piece, so it's not this group is going to do this group is going to do that, just the entire group, this is what we're going to look at, and people are different, we accept differences, we honor differences. Those types of answers in a very broad sense are very accepted. Then the other thing is that we offer equitable opportunity for everybody. So in the case that we were to have a family not want to participate in the event, that's their option to not participate in the event, but we are going to open these opportunities to everyone, regardless of how their gender orientation is, what their race is. We, again, are non-discriminatory. And this is a big thing. This is specifically, especially for staff, and needs to be in here, but, responding to concerns and complaints. So with this policy, we will be responding. Absolutely. There is no reason to not respond. If we hear of a complaint of harassment, there needs to be a response, because our main job through 4-H is to ensure safety and security of our youth, and to make sure that they are able to participate to their full capacity at any of our events, at any of our programs, and any of our clubs. And then the other key piece is that if we do have an incident, we do have something that continues to go on, if there's reports of harassment, we do need to report that. And there are links and different things and different entities, but those will be addressed. The Title IX Office of Equity are going to be some of those main individuals that we will contact right away to file a formal complaint, a formal report, and then also with the help of the state office to address those issues specifically. And then lastly is just that last little piece of the non-discrimination policy. And I will go ahead and just read it in its entirety, because I think it's very important. And this is directly how 4-H is going to be handling our inclusivity policy. So Montana State University's campuses are committed to providing an environment that emphasizes the dignity and worth of every member of its community, and that is free from harassment and discrimination based upon race, color, religion, national origin, creed, service in the uniformed services as defined in state and federal law, veteran status, sex, age, political ideas, marital or family status, pregnancy, physical or mental disability, genetic information, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. Such an environment is necessary to a healthy learning, working, and living atmosphere, because discrimination and harassment undermine human dignity and the positive connection among all people at our university. Acts of discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, dating violence, domestic violence, stalking, and retaliation will be addressed in consistency with this policy. And there's a couple of resources that I've added. Of course, there's quite a few more than that, but there's a couple of links for some of the information that is out there with 4-H and equity and inclusion, as well as Title IX office and other resources specific to Montana. And so with that, I will open up to the audience now for any questions that you may have. And again, like I said, we have several of the actual task force committee members on the presentation with us, so fire away. And if someone can watch the chat box and see if any questions have come up, that would be great. But this is the time. Please feel free to unmute yourself and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Kimberly, apologies if you had said this earlier in the presentation, but is this document now free for other people to use?
It is going to be coming out. I don't know. I know that it did get approval from all of the entities that needed to approve it. So the state office, the university attorney, the Office of Equity, and I believe as soon as it goes through the 4-H staff, then it shall be released. I didn't want to add it in as a PDF because I don't know with that group if they're ready to release it out to the public per se quite yet. I think they wanted to get it to staff and faculty before they make it available to everyone. But I'm sure that once it is public, it will be on the Montana 4-H site. But it has gone through all of the processes and all of the, going through the different lawyers and making sure that it's met all of those checks and balances. I know that the pieces that I've discussed have been approved and accepted already.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So as you look forward to getting this out to the information, how do you anticipate getting all of this information to the volunteers specifically? Like, I can see how information passes pretty fluidly between staff and faculty, but since volunteers, at least in Washington State, are your primary people actually working with youth and actually running events, I was just wondering what your plans are on getting the training to at least, each state's different, but we use a lot of volunteers.
Yes, no, and great question. And by all means, if any of the committee members want to jump on too, I will give you my answer, which is the way that I anticipate it to happen, because that's what we're working on in Montana. We're really trying to address, because I think not only with this particular policy and guidelines, but I think in general, getting information and disseminating that out to our volunteers, can be challenging and can be difficult. But I know that at the state office, we have someone specifically working on that outreach to volunteers and what that's going to look like. And, whether that's going to have symposiums with our volunteers as well. Right now, a lot of the times the extension agent is, tasked with that, but also there are plenty of resources in Montana where we're really trying to incorporate that piece to get our volunteers so that they're trained as well with the same information so that they are equipped to be able to go out to the audience, like you said, and be out there, because they're the ones that are going to be, encountering a lot of these questions, a lot of these situations are going to come to them, because like you said, they are the ones that are, holding the programs, working with the youth, working with the agents, working with the staff. So I believe in Montana, we will be coming up with a very specific formula to be able to reach our volunteers. And I guess I will throw it out to the committee members that are out there if they have any other insights specifically to that question.
I'm thinking maybe other states might have experiences, because once you've taken this next step, I'd love to hear what you guys do and how it works. Because I feel like that's the challenge, is the volunteers are primarily the hands-on people, and they are not receiving
you bet. No, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know, like I said, through our volunteer coordinator in the state office, he's really looking at how to, make that volunteer training very smooth, very, so that it is happening and that we're able to reach those volunteers. But you're absolutely right. I think that's a challenge, for extension throughout.
I think nationally, the VKRC, just like the PKRC, the VKRC is coming up. Probably that's when all the volunteers will be getting training around VKRC, because all our volunteer training right now are, definitely directed by some national guideline. So when VKRC will be in full force, I think that's when probably we'll see much more training around access, equity, belonging, I'm thinking. By the way,
I think you're right.
I love it. I remember that a faculty member from Wisconsin said that they had some sort of a training, which was not 4-H specific, but it showed essentially that kind of you are a safe space, that you have been trained. and there was something
training. The safe zone training.
Is that what it was? Did they have the safe zone training? Okay.
Yes.
I've been wondering if, I'm all about using pre-existing stuff. I wonder if that might be a starting point as we establish this, because what I've noticed is a disconnect between how fast we tell kids it's safe and actually having a safe place. So we're saying we're a welcoming space, and then I'm having youth go to events where they're experiencing oppression. Or being outed and discriminated against. So I think we almost have to get ahead of it as we build our, if we want to say we're welcoming, we have to be prepared before we say we're welcoming, or it's unsafe for a lot of these youth.
Absolutely.
I love what you say.
It might be cool to temporarily utilize something already pre-existing as we build our own trainings. Just throwing it out there. And I hadn't thought of it before, but I've been trying to figure out what to do about kids being outed negatively as we put up our safe space signs.
Hey, Kimberly.
Well, and there's lots to learn. Yes, go ahead.
No, this is Mary Fran. Just wanted to, jump in. And you were talking about different states, and maybe we have some examples. We're actually in Montana really, really lucky that we're one of the first states to adopt, not one of the first, but we're among a handful of states that have adopted this set of guidelines. There have been other states that have tried and have been knocked back down. So there isn't a whole lot of work. I mean, there are some states that have done an amazing amount of work, but it's going to be interesting to try to find the way to work through this. And one of the ways we're doing it here is we're developing, as Kimberly said, this document to teach or train our staff. And then we're going to go from there and work on the volunteers with our volunteer specialist. But anyway, that's what we're planning on doing, just what Kimberly said.
Perfect. Thank you, Mary Fran. And I did in the resource list there, if you all, and I did share the PowerPoint, so it is available. I made it available to Deb so that when she disseminates all of the summit information, you all will get a copy of the slides to utilize, But on the resource page, there is one. I did put a couple of the links to the National 4-H site on diversity, equity, inclusion, and it gives all sorts of different things, which I'm sure both of you, or the two folks that have asked questions, have seen before, but it links directly to that. And then there's another one that actually talks about, and they already have uploaded different things with like Safe Zone. I know that there's a group, and I can't think of what their name is right off the top of my head, but I know that there's several folks that we had seen in that initial presentation that I was there with Mary Fran, but Joe Rand is like a co-chair of this group, and they have all sorts of different resources. So I encourage you to look at that resource page that I had in the slideshow and go to those links, because they list all sorts of different things that might be a great spot to start with, training up your volunteers.
Kimberly, one more thing. Campbell did put in the chat box the document that the document that was created first and that we adapted for Montana. The group that you're talking about that Joe Rand is running, they're actually having a meeting right now that it's called the National 4-H LGBTQ+ Affinity Group. Yeah. And if anybody wants to contact Joe Rand from Michigan or Minnesota.
Minnesota.
Sorry, can't remember. Anyway, he's the one.
Minnesota. He's from Minnesota.
He runs that group, well, helps to run that group, and they're fabulous for information, like Kimberly said.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback on what Mary Fran just said. We had Joe Rand at last year's summit, and he gave a very terrific session about what Mary Fran was just saying about the affinity group and the work that he and his group are doing. So if you go to the Virtual Rainbows YouTube channel, you can see Joe's session from last year, and that has some really great information that I think you might find useful as well.
And a plug for Joe, another one. He is great, and if you want to reach out to him directly, he responds very readily, very easily. He's great to talk to, and he has a plethora of resources and individuals he can connect you that may even be closer to your region, wherever you're coming in from. So the beginning stages, wherever you're at, he has some really great advice, some really great wisdom, and some great resources that he's always happy to share.